The words of the teacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. Futile, futile, laments the teacher. Absolutely futile, everything is futile. What benefit do people get from all the effort which they expend on earth? The generation comes and the generation goes, but the earth remains the same through the ages. The sun rises and the sun sets. It hurries away to a place from which it rises again. The wind goes to the south, it circles around the north. Round and round the wind goes, on its rounds it returns. All the streams flow into the sea, but the sea is not full. And to the place where the streams flow, there they will flow again. All this monotony is tiresome. No one can bear to describe it. The eye is never satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear ever content with hearing. What exists now is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing truly new on earth. Is there anything about which someone can say, look at this, it is new? It was already done long ago, before our time. No one remembers the former events, nor will anyone remember the events that are yet to happen. They will not be remembered by the future generations.
Morning. Morning. Good to see everybody this morning. You know, last week we stood on our own toes pretty hard, and we kind of beat this old earthly man up pretty good. You know, the value that this body that we're walking around in has. You'll remember we even talked about how we don't have enough going on to even put one foot in front of the other without God holding our hand. And just don't have a lot of value. But we're going to do a little better this morning. We're going to talk about that in man that does have so much value. Enough value that God would send his own son up on this earth to die the cruel death upon the cross. And I don't think that it's any mystery that we're talking about the soul. We're going to talk about the soul this morning. And we're going to try to look into that and maybe learn a little more about the soul, but maybe not learn as much about the soul maybe as we can teach about the soul. You know, sometimes in our efforts to teach, you know, we come across people who are in terrible shape. Terrible shape. And they may have abused the body with drugs. They may be strung out on drugs at the time that we come into contact with them. They may be in terrible marriage situations. All kinds of things. And we look at them, and I've done this myself. You know, maybe somebody that was, like I say, on drugs, and you think, how am I going to clean that up? How am I going to change that? How am I going to do that? Well, you know, let me tell you a little story. When I was thinking about this lesson this past couple of weeks, I was out in my shop, and I got an old wood stove out there in my shop, and it was pretty cold. It was down to about 28 degrees then, and so I built me a fire in there, and the fire, you know, a little while later was going good, and I had this big old log sitting there that I'd been kind of skipping, putting in there because it was so big. But I was going to be out there pretty much all day or in and out of my shop, and I thought, I'm going to put this big log in there. Well, I got the thing up there, and it was barely, I had to turn it to even to get it to fit in the door of the stove. But you know, I opened it back up in a couple hours, and that big log is burned down to pretty much there's nothing but hot embers. Well, let me tell you another little story. I started that fire with a dollar store, what I call a dollar store clicker, and Laura can appreciate this because I fuss at them all the time. It was a dollar store clicker that you click, and I've had this one for about 2 years, and it's been dry fluid for about 6 months. Some of y'all probably still got some of these. And when you click it, you click, 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 and it just kind of sparking. You know, it ain't really doing what it's supposed to do. Well, on this particular fire, I think I had a piece of, you know, some real small shavings of kindling, and I think a little bit of a paper towel, and I click, 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 and it got started. you know, so all was good. You know, that's the way it is with the gospel. And when we see somebody that's in terrible shape, we don't think about them. We shouldn't think about that big log. We should think about our little clicker. That's all it took. Something that wasn't even functioning right to get that fire going. To burn that big log was just that little spark. So when we see somebody, we're not trying to save them. If Ralph was in a terrible condition, I'm not trying to save Ralph's body. He may have already abused that body beyond repair. But his soul is still good. And his soul will still last for eternity. So if I can get that little fire started inside somebody, it'll grow and it'll burn every big log that they have in their life. That's what we got to look at, is just get that little fire started. That's a little bit of a side note this morning, but I thought about that, so I wanted to share it with you just a little bit. But as we talk about the soul this morning, I want you to think about this now in means of teaching other people as well. Now, Emily's kind of my deep thinker. She's a little bit like me. She kind of thinks about deep things sometimes. So I'm going to ask Emily, but I don't want her to answer. Are we our soul? Are we our soul? Well, we're going to look at that a little bit. And in a sense, the answer is yes. If you turn over to the book of Genesis chapter 2 and you look at verse 7, it says, God formed man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living soul. God created man, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So where did man come from? Man came from the dust of the ground. I came from the dust of the ground. But where did my life, where did my soul come from? It comes straight out of God. Did you catch it? It said God breathed into the nostril of man and he became a living soul. We come straight out of God's own being through his breath. That's where life comes from. Not from the dust of the ground. Not from this earth. It comes straight from God. So, is our souls us? Are we our souls? Well, in a sense, yes. But in a sense, no. If you look at Genesis 3 and verse 19, it says, for your bodies are dust, and to dust you shall return. Our bodies were made out of dust, and to dust it shall return. How many times have we heard in the funerals that put into a little bit different words that says ashes to ashes and dust to dust? That's what the body is. It comes from ashes and it's going to return to ashes or to dust where it came from. Well, let's look at it just a little bit further. Turn with me, if you would, over to Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 7, and it's going to clear it up just a little bit. And it says there, and the dust, or the body, returns to the ground it came from, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. A little more information about the spirit. The body goes away, decays, destroyed, and it's going. But the spirit, the soul, returns to God who gave it. Now we're getting a little more valuable all the time, aren't we? Well, when do we separate body and soul? Most of us may know this, but I'm afraid some people may not realize when the body and soul separates. Well, we're going to look at just lots of passages you can look at this, but we're going to look at just two passages that talk about this. First of all, let's examine Acts 9. I'm going to turn over there and I'm going to read that. Acts 9. And I'm going to read 36 through 42. Now it says, now there was at Joppa a certain disciple named Tabitha, which by interpretation is called Dorcas. This woman was full of good works and alms deeds which she did. And it came to pass in those days that she was sick and died, whom when they had washed, they laid her in the upper chamber. And forsomuch as Lydia was nigh to Joppa, and the disciples had heard that Peter was there, they sent unto him 2 men, desiring him that he would not delay to come to them. Then Peter arose and went with them, and when he was come, they brought him into the upper chamber, and all the widows stood by him weeping, and showing the coats and garments which Dorcas made while she was with him. But Peter put them all forth, and kneeled down, and prayed, and turned him to the body, said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand, and lifted her up, and when she had called the saints and the widows, presented her alive. And it was known throughout all Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. Now there's one passage in there I want us to catch and look at again. It says back there in verse 39 that the widows stood by him weeping and showing the coats and the garments which Dorcas made while she was with them. Now her body hadn't gone anywhere at this time. She hadn't been buried. She was still there. But something about her was gone that they're recognizing here. And that was her soul. That was her spirit was gone. And that's what I want to show. Our spirit leaves that body. Now, a little side note here, wasn't that an amazing miracle? Peter called that spirit back to that body and took her by the hand and stood her up. That soul came back into that lady, and she was back alive. That was an amazing miracle. But for this lesson, I want you to see, it had left. It was gone. She was no longer with them. Well, I also want to turn over to the book of Luke. Turn with me over to Luke. I want to read this. Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16, and I'm going to read verses 19 through 23. It says, there was a certain rich man, which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate, full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to pass that the beggar died, and was carried by the angel into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. Is that just a parable? It is a parable, but is it just a parable? No. It's a revelation. It's a revelation of what we are to see when this body dies. That our souls, no matter trained right or trained wrong, have a place to go. They have an existence and a consciousness after we leave this body. And I want us to see that. First of all, there's no such thing as just a parable, like I said. Parables are always taken from things true to life. And Jesus did not make up fictitious tales to illustrate things. He always used things that we could relate to or that would teach us even though he was really talking about something else. And it would teach the generations to come. So you can rest assured that this is something that's going to happen to your soul, and it's something that's going to happen to my soul as it's going to continue to move, it's going to continue to dwell, and it is going to be somewhere when your body goes back to dust. So, Luke is not just a parable. It's a revelation of what actually happens when one dies. The soul departs at death and has a conscious existence. We must remember that. All right, so we've determined that we have a soul and that it lasts. We have a soul and it lasts. What does that mean to us? Well, let's think about it just a minute. We talked last week how we didn't have much value. Well, why does the soul have value? Why is the soul valuable? Well, let's turn over and read where we've already talked about, but where the soul came into existence. Turn with me, if you will, to the book of Genesis, the creation story, and we're going to look at Genesis chapter 1, and I'm going to read verses 26 and 27. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish in the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. All right? Now, I want you to think about something just a little bit different. We must remember that when God looks at us, when God looks at Drew back there, he doesn't see Drew like you and me see Drew. Do you realize he can see the soul of Drew? The Bible talks about that, about calling it the heart of man. That God can see the heart of man. And that's what he sees when he looks at me and you. He don't just see this body. He sees your soul. And that's important for us to remember. Now, so what did God create in his image? Was it man's body or was it man's soul? Well, let's look at that just a little bit. Look at John 4:24. John 4:24. And if you look there at John 24, it says God is a spirit. God is a spirit. Then if you turn over to Luke 24 and verse 39, this is Jesus talking right after his crucifixion and coming out of being buried. He's appearing back to those that know him, and this is what Jesus said. First of all, those that saw him accused him of being a spirit. They thought he was a spirit. And he said, "Behold my hands. Behold my feet." He said, a spirit doesn't have flesh and bones. I'm not a spirit because you can see my hands. You can see my feet. You can see my flesh. So, I've always thought, when the Bible tells us that we were made in God's image, that it was his. He might look a little like Jake. But I'm not sure that that's what he was talking about. Because he don't have that. Our spirit, our soul was made in the image of God. And that puts value on it. That puts additional value on our spirit. Secondly, the soul is valuable because its existence is not terminated when our body is laid to rest. The body dies, and it is laid in the ground and returns to the dust. As we've already said, dust to dust. We understand that. We've all seen that. The nature of the soul is altogether different. And this is what gives me, and it's what gives you and each individual value. That's what gives us value. Of course, that's what Jesus was trying to teach. Teach us in Matthew 16 and 26 and a lot of other passages when he says, for what is man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his soul? That's what he was talking about. What can a man profit? What can a man add to him if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? He can't add anything to it. He can't add one thing to his soul. How we live this brief lifespan that we have here determines our eternal destiny. That's where they got to come together, anyway. That's where your soul, you could say, is you. Because what you do in this brief vapor period of time determines what's going to happen to that soul for eternity. Isn't that amazing? That tells us that we need to evaluate all things in our lives. Everything we do, we need to evaluate our possessions, our decisions, our actions. Every move we make, we need to look at through the eyes of our soul. Do we do that? Do we look at every move we make through the eyes of our soul? I'm afraid we don't. We don't do that. Now, I want you to think about the verse that we just talked about back up here, where it says, what can a man profit if he has the whole world? He can't add anything. So what is God saying? God is saying one soul is worth more than everything you see around you. One soul is worth more than the whole world. That's what God is saying. And he's not saying that should be that way to you. He's saying that's the way it is to me. One soul is worth more than anything that this world is. God created this world in 6 days. 6 days he created this world. But I'm going to tell you, when he breathed the breath of life into man's nostrils, he did something more than just create this world. Now you think about that. When he breathed into man's nostrils and man became a living being, it was more than just flesh and blood upon this earth. That was the greatest thing he did. That comes from within him. Do you ever wonder why God calls us his children? Because he didn't create it. He didn't. They can actually stand straight and look halfway decent. But if something happens to that piece of furniture, if it gets burned up in a fire, or if it gets knocked over and damaged, I'll build another. But if something happens to Aaron, it'll kill him. It'll hurt me more than I've ever been hurt. Because Aaron is a different creation from me than that piece of furniture. And that's why God says one soul is worth more than all this earth put together. Nothing on this earth is worth your soul. And we must remember that. And if we can't remember that about our own soul, we're in a terrible shape. You talk about seeing somebody strung out on drugs that you think, how in the world am I going to help them? Look in the mirror. If you're not putting importance on your soul, you're the same boat as this person over here that you don't know how you're going to help. You're in the same boat. Your eternal soul is at risk. Well, the soul has value also because of the cost that it took to redeem it. And to redeem it means to buy it back. What did God have to do to buy it back. God set down a set of rules, and man broke them. Man was destined to be lost. But God said, I can't do it. I can't do it. I've got to make a way of escape for these souls. I've got to do it, or I've got to end the whole thing now so that no more souls will be lost. So he made a way of escape. And how did he do that? By sending his own son to the earth to take the form of a man and to die the cruel death upon the cross. Now sometimes when you hear that, we really don't think of what a sacrifice that was. God has already said that one soul is worth more than the whole earth. So he didn't sacrifice the earth to redeem our souls, did he? He didn't sacrifice something like that. No, it took a member of the Godhead, his own son, to come down to earth and to die on the cross. That was more valuable than giving the whole earth. The whole earth got its destiny. It's already planned out. It's already foretold of what's going to happen to it. 1 Peter 1:18 through 19 said it took the blood of the Lamb who had no blemish and no spot. That was Jesus Christ. That's what it took. The soul of man is worth more than the extreme pain that Christ had to go through. Not just leaving his throne in heaven, but it took him going through that extreme pain to buy back our soul. Took more than John the Baptist, didn't it? You think about John the Baptist. He's a pretty good old boy, wasn't he? He's a pretty good important fellow. The Bible calls him the forerunner of Christ. He was going to come and he was going to introduce Christ. He was going to start telling what Christ was going to do for us, even though it had been prophesied about. He was going to come and he was going to be the voice of Christ, start baptizing people, showing them what it took, baptize them, that they would be baptized until Christ comes. Folks, you are standing good until Christ comes because you have been baptized in the baptism of John the Baptist. The power that God gave. That's a pretty important fellow. But what did he say about Christ? He said, I'm not worthy to bend down and loosen the man's hand. He said, that's the difference between me and Christ. And I'm not worthy to do that. So it wasn't John the Baptist. And I'm sorry, if it wasn't John the Baptist, it ain't going to be me and it ain't going to be you that can do it. It took Jesus to do it. You know, as I said, Jesus is worth more than all the earth. But we must understand that the soul must be extremely valuable for that to have had to happen. The soul must be extremely valuable. Well, how do we hold our soul in mind? You know, okay, we've determined we've got a soul. We've determined it's got value. We've determined that it's more valuable than John the Baptist. But where do we hold it? Where do I hold my soul in my frame of mind? Well, you remember John 16, verse 26. We read that. We turned to it and read it, but we didn't finish it. We didn't quite finish it. It says, for what will a man profit if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? That's what we study. But the next part of it says, what will you give in exchange for your soul? What would you give in exchange for your soul? Let's say that you walking along and you come to that proverbial crossroad, as we've all seen in the movies, and there stands the devil. Now think about it. The devil starts talking to you in his enticing ways, and he says, I'll give you $100,000 if you'll sell me your soul. Now, in the story that we saw on TV, at least one of them, guy traded so he could play the guitar. Remember that? You know, he could play the guitar with him. But what if the devil said, I'll give you $100,000 for your soul? Talk to each one of us individually. That's a lot of money. What if he said, I'll give you $1 million? Your eyes didn't light up when he said $100,000. I'll give you $1 million for your soul. You probably won't have to work again a day in your life. I'll give you $1 million for your soul. Maybe your eyes didn't light up. But he said, I'll give you $185 billion. $185 billion for your soul. Now, why did I pick that figure? Because that's what the richest man in the world is worth right now. Is $185 billion. Do you know who that man is? It's Elon Musk. How many of you know who Elon Musk is? Some of you do. Some of you know who Elon Musk is. Well, I didn't. I had to look him up. I heard his name, but I didn't know what he did. Well, he's a fellow from South Africa. He's born in South Africa. He's an American. He founded Tesla Motors and SpaceX. And he just surpassed some other fellow that names escape me, and has become the richest man in the world, worth $185 billion. Here's what's fascinating. Not how stupid I am. I didn't know what he did. Does that kind of show the value of money? I didn't know what he did. I recognized his name. But the richest person in the world, I bet a lot of you here didn't really know what he did to get his money. Now that ought to put in your mind what money is worth. That the person who got the most, you don't know how they did it. Must not be too big a thing. Well, what about old Solomon? Remember Solomon in the Bible? Kirk read that this morning for us. That was Solomon talking. Experts have determined what Solomon would be worth in today's terms, and that's somewhere over $2 trillion. Somewhere over $2 trillion. Did you listen to the words that Kirk read this morning? His translation was a little bit different than mine. But Solomon looked back at his life and everything that he'd done, everything that he had, and he said, vanity of vanity. None of it is worth anything of what my soul was worth. None of it is worth anything. All is vanity when it comes to this world. Don't forget, last week we talked about we can't even guide our own steps when it comes to this. We can't even guide our own steps. But our soul is worth more than everything in the world and the world itself. Well, I bet you every one of you here this morning, as I went through that list of what the devil would give you there on the crossroads, said, nope, I won't sell. I won't sell. I won't sell for $100,000. I won't sell for $1 million. I won't sell for $185 billion. I won't sell for $2 trillion. That's what I say. No sale. Money don't mean that much to me. No sale. But sadly, we'll sell it for a whole lot less. Just like the Bible teaches. We'll take a whole lot less than $100,000. 1 Timothy 6 and verse 10 says, for the love of money, some translations say, for the love of money is the root of all evil, is what the King James Version says. Some says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Either one is correct. Now I want you to notice something there in that verse. Normally, when I think of somebody who has a love of money, man, they love money. They got money. That ain't what that's saying. It's saying money is the root of all evil or all kinds of evil. It can be the brokest person in the world. The love of money is what brings you down. I cannot have nothing. But if I'm out here putting everything in front of taking care of my soul, everything in front of reading to see what it takes to take care of my soul, Money sent me straight to hell, and I ain't got any, because I wasn't very good at making it. But the love of it sent me to hell. So if you got a bunch of money stacked up, man, that's okay. Be careful with it. But you people that ain't got a bunch of money stacked up, don't think you're in the clear. Because it's love of money. You can work yourself to death trying to get something that you never going to get. You may never get it because you ain't no good at it. But you can still lose your soul over it. Will we sell out for a few minutes of sinful pleasure? Maybe that's what we do. We don't take $100,000, much less anything higher, but we'll sell out for a few minutes of pleasure. Few minutes of pleasure, that'd be good. Look at Hebrews 12 and verse 16. And in there it says, lest there be any fornicator. And this context of this is when it's talking about that man has gotten away from studying the Bible. He's gotten away from keeping his eyes on the narrow path. And he's gotten away from putting God first. And it says, lest there be any fornicator or profane person. If we are a fornicator or a profane person, we sold our soul. We sold our soul. Think about poor old Esau. You remember Esau in the Old Testament when he come in and he'd been out doing whatever Esau had been doing, and there was his brother. Esau was the oldest, and his youngest brother was sitting there, and he had a bowl of porridge. Esau was hungry. And Esau said, man, I'll sell you my birthright. In other words, you get to be the oldest. I'll take the back seat to being the oldest, let you have the inheritance and decide what to do with it. You get all the benefit of being that if I can have that porridge. That's what Esau said. Why did he do that? Because he was hungry right at that moment. He was hungry right at that moment. If we see a beautiful person out here and we think we got a moment we might can be with them, or if we see a shiny object and we think I'm going to have to work harder, I might have to work on Sunday, whatever the case may be, to have that shiny object, we did just what Esau did. And don't tell me you haven't ever read that story of Esau and thought, boy, he was stupid. Sold his soul for a bowl of stew. That's what we do. That's exactly what we do. We sell our soul for something not worth hardly anything because it satisfies that moment. Aren't we something living in the moment when God has told us to think about your soul? Make plans for your soul. We've got to do that. Or maybe we'll sell our soul and let some man beguile us through false teaching. We're just let somebody teach us wrong. I sure wish the Bible would have warned me about that. You know, here I've gone down this path and I put my trust in somebody who was teaching something that wasn't right. Somebody who was trying to beguile me. Now think about what he said. I had fallen victim to somebody that was trying to beguile me. That's not how we should look at other denominations. That's not how we should look at teachers in other denominations. Because those people possibly, I'm not saying there ain't some out there that are, specifically know they're doing wrong, and they're specifically trying to teach you to do wrong so that they benefit somehow. But that's not everybody. Some teachers have been beguiled themselves. And now they think they're doing right. I've got to continually look at my life, continually look at this book to make sure that's not me. To make sure that's not me. Because I can be beguiled. You can be beguiled. And now you think about a man who's got the ability to teach, and he believes he's teaching right. He believes he's teaching the truth. He's going to set you on fire. He's going to bring you into his fold because he can do it. He thinks he's doing right. Who's got to know he's doing wrong? We do. We're the one that's got to recognize the voice of God. We're the one that's got to say, that said something different about that, and then we go look at it. That's our responsibility, and that's his responsibility too. But he shirked it and still believes he's doing it right. That's what we have to keep in mind. Is these false teachers that are out there, they may believe that they're doing it right. Remember the scriptures in Revelation that says, some will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have I not prophesied in your name? Have I not cast out demons in your name? And he said, get out of the way, I don't know you. You've been doing it wrong. You've been doing it under false teaching. That person believed they were doing right. We've got to study and make sure that we can recognize the voice of God. 2 Corinthians 11 and verses 13 and 15 says the devil will do it. The devil will beguile you. And if the devil will beguile you, don't you think he will take somebody that you trust, somebody that you know? It might be a family member. It might be a long family member acquaintance. And it's beguiling you. That's not their fault. It's their fault for them, but it's your fault for you for letting that happen. We can't do that. Well, we might lose our souls just because we are too foolish to put forth the effort to save it. We're too foolish to put forth the effort to save it. How much effort will you put forward for $100,000? Now, I'm not talking about just your daily job. We all have our daily jobs. But you might see something out here you don't have. Let's say it's a piece of property. I can buy that piece of property over there. That thing looks like it's kind of leaning. It ain't doing too good. The floors are sagging. I could fix that property. And probably in a year, I could fix it up. And there's a lot of TV shows called flipping property. I could flip that property and make some money. I might make $100,000 on that. You probably ain't in New Mexico, but some places you're going to make $100,000 on it. What do you think? I'll put forth that effort. Well, how much effort are you putting forward to take care of your son? Are you putting that effort out? Sometimes. I'm afraid we're not. Luke chapter 12 and verse 20 says, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of you. This night. It's fine for you to be over there fixing up this house and make that $100,000. That's fine, Scott. Go ahead and do that. But you better be putting in the effort to save your soul, to educate your soul. You better be putting that effort in and making that number one requirement. Because that $100,000 that ain't going with you, or nothing that you buy is going with you. It's sheer foolishness to pursue that which pertains to this world only. It's sheer foolishness. Don't be a fool. Don't be a fool. Now, as we close this message, I want you to think about one more thing. I want any of you here that's got any age, any time of years in your past, and some of you that are younger, I want you to think about a past vehicle that you've had. A past vehicle that's been several years back. I know a man bought a Toyota pickup. Like that Toyota pickup, when he went to pick it up, they wouldn't even put a trailer hitch on it so he could pull something with it. And that's what they've been bragging about. But this Toyota was no. You know who that was, George? Think about a past vehicle that you had. How much importance do you put on that past vehicle? Do you remember it very well? Do you remember how many miles it had when you got rid of it? That's what this is. That's what this is. It's a vehicle. One of these days, it's going to be just a past vehicle for our souls. That's all it is. Our soul is going to have some other kind of vehicle. When this world is over and this world is folded up, it says we're going to be changed in the twinkling of an eye as we go into heaven. We're going to have a new vehicle. Some kind of new vehicle. What it looks like, I don't know. But I know what this vehicle looks like. And this vehicle ain't going to mean any more than that vehicle that you think of that you had several years ago. It's all it got to it. It was just a vapor. It was there for a little while and it was gone. You didn't have any use for it anymore. It was wore out. Or you just got it different. That's what we're going to do. This is going to be gone. All it is a vehicle. Matthew 25 and verse 46. It says that the wicked will go away into eternal punishment. The wicked, the unprepared, those who didn't think about their soul, will go away into eternal punishment. But the righteous into eternal life. It's always been that way. From the beginning of time, you have an individual that always had that choice of what am I going to prepare for throughout the number of years that I live here on earth. Am I going to prepare myself for eternal punishment by forsaking it during the life I have here, the gospel? Or am I going to prepare for eternal salvation and prepare for that? So that the vehicle that I have now is not that important to me. It's the future of my soul is what's important to me. Will you follow God this morning? Will you accept the gospel into your mind and your body and form your soul in a way that it will be saved? Or will you follow the way of destruction? Will you follow the way of destruction? Do you need a little stew this morning? Will you trade everything that God has to offer you just for a little bit of stew because you're hungry right now? Choice has always been yours. I hope you make the right choice this morning, and I hope if there's anything we can do for you to get your life right, that you will let us do that. All things are prepared that we can take care of whatever your needs may be.